Now we're going to the countdown. Good afternoon and aloha. My name is Juergen Steinmetz, joining you from eTurboNews and livestream.travel. And with me is Dr. Peter Tarlow. He is joining us from College Station in Texas. And Peter, I hope the weather in College Station is a little bit nicer than here in Hawaii. It's raining quite heavily and has been raining all day. We might even get some thunderstorms coming our way later. How's everything in College Station?
It's slightly misty, but it's warm, it's nice. It's around 70 degrees, which is about 20 degrees Celsius. And in the afternoon, it became sunny. So we had a little mist in the morning, and then it switched over to sun. So I think we won on the weather. Usually you guys have better weather than we have, but today I think we have better weather than you have.
Yeah, it's so we give this day to Texas today.
And yeah, one of the rare occasions, because usually you guys have the better weather.
No, we usually do. I have to admit that.
Yes,
And
wonderful weather.
And a lot going on last week, and we're going to have an exciting week again coming up this week. We had been reporting about the SCOL election for world president, and actually had the world president in an interview yesterday. We zoomed into the Christmas party for the SCOL club in Orlando, Florida, what was a lot of fun. And you can see this still running on our show. And of course, last week was probably one of the most important days in the last few years for world tourism, with the election of the new Secretary General. And the new Secretary General is the old Secretary General. But there was a twist to this election. Even though he was re-elected, he is going to be leading the organization for another 4 years. Someone else really took the show. There was a movement, what was approved by the General Assembly, to shift the responsibility for the rebuilding of the travel and tourism industry, what obviously is the most important part we all need, and going through away from the Secretary General's lead to a lead of new people. And this was an initiative brought forward by Saudi Arabia and by Spain, with all new people, and they're not reporting to the Secretariat and to the Secretary General, what in all essence makes the Secretary General more like a king without a lot of power. So we see where this all goes, but we're in for some major changes within the World Tourism Organization. And I think everyone is standing by to see how this works out, if this works out. And I'm sure there's a lot more to come.
Yeah, always be careful of a king, because you never quite know what tricks they have up their sleeves. So often when people believe a king is kind of pseudo dead, you know, in politics, they say either live with the king or kill him, but don't have him wounded. So we'll see what happens here.
No, absolutely. And I mean, besides all this, a lot going on in the world of tourism with the new virus strain. Today, there was a cruise ship that left, I believe, Holland on the way to New Orleans.
Norwegian's cruise ship.
Norwegian's cruise ships with an emerging number of new cases, and it's an all-vaccinated cruise. So we have to see what will happen once it gets to New Orleans. If it gets to New Orleans, it's all kind of in the open right now, and to see what's happening. Also, in today's news, we just published is that there is a new study apparently that if the Johnson & Johnson booster shot is taken by people who had previously received the Pfizer or Moderna, it's supposed to be a lot more effective and also protect, apparently, in the first results of the study against the new variant. So a lot going on. I think we're going to learn a lot more in the next few days and the next few weeks.
Yeah, we may be getting more booster shots on a regular basis. But, that's just part of the price of travel. Certainly, other things are going on in the world. I've been interviewed by newspapers across the world. In Brazil, I did an hour program about the issue of what's called in Portuguese biossegurança, or biosecurity. In other words, issues of health. And of course, the Brazilians suffer terribly from the COVID outbreak. And much of their tourism is dependent on their entire public health system. So this was a really major event. I think I sent you a copy of the program. It's in Portuguese, but it was over an hour that I spoke dealing with those issues. Also, we had this as a major event, and I don't think we've spoken about it, but we had for our own World Tourism Network, people from countries all over the world wanted to participate in looking at the AMI variant and how this might or might not affect tourism. So those are some issues. Of course, one of the big problems is what happened in Africa. When they discovered this, everybody kind of beat up on Africa on some level. And I wonder now if countries are going to be afraid to speak about a new variant. They'll just keep their mouth shut.
Yeah, and that is definitely an issue I think we all need to follow. You cannot really blame a country. You cannot blame a region for this virus. It is a worldwide problem. And it's not only Africa, what is now closed. Even Japan is closed completely, and many other countries that were supposed to open remain closed. I just heard New Zealand extended no foreigner, no visitors policy for another 6 months. And so we don't know where this all will end, No,
nobody knows. It's certainly, if you're in the tourism business in a place like New Zealand, you got some real problems, because you've now lost all your clientele, and New Zealand doesn't have a population big enough to just have internal tourism. In the United States, you can survive just on domestic tourism. But if you're in a place like New Zealand, you got a real problem with, I think its population's someplace between 3 and 5 million people, and that's just not sustainable for a tourism industry.
No, definitely. Luckily, New Zealand has other industries and is not reliant on tourism, never has been, but it's an important part, of course, for people who live in this environment. I mean, it's probably more of a challenge with Bali. Bali opened up in October and no one is coming. So that's a whole new, different issue.
It is. There's a big problem, which is you have to look at this two ways. The impact of the tourism industry on a national gross national product, but you also have to look at it on the micro level. If you are working in the tourism industry, hotels, restaurants, tour guide, whatever it happens to be, booking tickets, and there are no tourists, you personally are now out of business. And so I think what we're going to see is a real lowering of the level of service around the world. It's already lowered tremendously. But as people leave the tourism industry, they're afraid to work in it. Then what's going to happen is that when they want to open up, there won't be the people there in order to become the staff. There'll just be staff shortages throughout the entire industry. And that means worse customer service. That means angrier visitors. That means prices will have to go up in order to try to hire new people. And all those become a really vicious cycle that becomes a secondary problem for the tourism industry. So not only are you dealing with COVID, but you're dealing with now lack of workers, higher inflation, higher costs, and therefore higher prices for giving people less quality of service.
Yeah, and I don't know how you see the upcoming Christmas season. We're in here, I can see our tourism arrivals here in Hawaii are up. I mean, we see a lot of visitors here. And I don't know how this is going to be with what everyone expected, a very heavy, big industry for Europe, when Europe is under threat and again thinking about closing down and telling people to better stay home.
Yeah.
So we don't know where this is all going.
Yeah. See, I would assume, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume most of the people visiting Hawaii are Americans. It's mainly a domestic market.
Yes, it is.
But if you're, say, East Coast places or places that are dependent, such as Miami, on foreign travel, or not necessarily dependent, but at least a good part of their business comes from foreigners entering the country, that's going to make it very difficult. And, you know, the new rules, and I have to deal with this on Thursday, is that you have to get a COVID test in 24 hours before you can get on the plane. Well, if you're in a major city, that's not that much of a problem. Certainly in College Station, I can get a rapid PCR test, but I'm going to be in Ecuador. And the chances of my finding a rapid PCR test in Ecuador is almost nil. I'm already starting to look for it now. And that means I have a problem. I have a plane that leaves at 12 midnight. I have to get a rapid test somehow from 12 midnight to the next 12 midnight with only 24 hours and get the results back. And that means I won't be able to do it till at least 8 o'clock the next morning. So I really don't have 24 hours. I have about 18 hours.
Well, and yeah, you're absolutely right. If you are,
so I called the airline and asked them what to do, and they said, we don't know. We have all our passengers have the same problem. We don't know if we're going to be able to have anybody in the flight.
And,
now, again,
and Peter, exactly what you're saying is kind of the attitude for the airlines. The airlines don't want to be responsible. I had the same before we knew about the new variant, when I was traveling to Europe for the World Travel Market and then on to Germany. You call airlines. I called, in my case, United Airlines, and ended up the information was very different from what the reality was. Right. And then when I called Eurowings to fly to Germany, they'd simply say, we cannot give you any information, just find out on your own. And I said, so, but you expect
where do you find
everything. So when you get to the counter, and I did, all of a sudden, again, I didn't have a QR code necessary. So you're scrambling, trying to get this all together while you're standing in line, checking in. There is no good system in place, not from the authorities, but also not from the airlines. The airlines don't want to be responsible for giving out wrong information, and the chances that information are changing, this could happen at any minute, any second.
That's really the problem. And that's not airlines' fault, that's government's fault. You know, when I called the State Department and said, well, how do you do this? They said, we don't know. I said, well, if I have to get them in 24 hours and the only plane leaves at 1 or 2 in the morning, and there's no rapid PCR tests on the Ecuadorian coast, can I ever get home? And they said, well, maybe you could fly from Guayaquil to Quito, spend the next few days in Quito, get a test in Quito, and then get on another flight. That means you have to buy another ticket. You got to change your air. There's a loss. And often government bureaucrats don't think about their decisions and how it impacts the traveling public.
Plus, you put yourself, almost say, in danger in going to another big city and deal with whatever the situation is there. So you have to study for all kinds of scenarios. And there's also really is a point how important it is these days to get travel insurance, travel delay insurance, and insurance that would cover you in case there is a COVID issue. So it becomes a whole different system, I guess.
Which again, therefore, ups the price. And so, you know, if you're a family and you have to get COVID insurance and travel insurance and delay insurance and whatever other type of insurance there is along the way, maybe your ticket cost you $800. It's now costing you $1,000, but that's not $200 more. That's $200 multiplied by 4 or 5. There's now another almost $1,000. It's a whole nother ticket. So what they're basically doing is the individual business traveler can probably figure this out, but the family or the leisure traveler is going to say, you know what, it's easy to stay home. I'll just drive someplace.
Yeah. Now, when you see the problem, Peter, also or if you compare it better, what you experienced in Israel, where you can get a rapid PCR test at the airport.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a solution to really,
Yeah.
for airlines to push, because it is possible?
Yeah.
And if no, airlines may have to invest, but eventually it might be a moneymaker also for the airlines if they
It
invest.
might be. Certainly, when we came to Israel, and I brought a group there, almost everyone in our group was incredibly impressed about how efficient, logical, and simple the system was. And now, of course, Israel is a first world country, but still, that means we're going to have to come with aid to other countries which are not necessarily as developed as Israel is. And Europe can certainly do it. Europe is a highly developed region of the world. The United States can. I don't know if countries in some of Asia and Africa, subcontinent of Africa, of Asia, are capable of that level of help unless we give it to them. We help them. We send people and say, this is the methodology. And maybe that's what tourism needs to do. Maybe we need a new tourism Peace Corps that will help people around the world come up to the levels that are needed in order to face continuing crises.
Yeah, but Peter, even if you look at the situation before COVID and today, international airlines, like airlines based in the United States particularly, but also many airlines based in Europe, are taking their own security system in. When you go to any airport an American carrier lands on United, if you go to Frankfurt, if you go to if you go to destinations like Ghana, Accra, Ghana, where they're flying to, you're going to have TSA and you have US security people on the ground. And that's the same with Germany. You have federal police officers on the ground at any airport they fly to, otherwise they won't. And specifically with El Al. You know, El Al knows before you even get to the counter who you are. So
absolutely.
So it would be not too much more, I think, to take the PCR test, whatever it takes for the rapid PCR test, to take it on board and establish it at airports. And that is already done at airports around Europe, and
yes.
it's done at some other key.
I know when I leave on Thursday, on Tuesday, I'm going to get a PCR test. And I will get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'll have the results by 8:15.
Yeah, you get the results right at the airport.
Yeah, I mean, so there's no reason in today's methodologies and today's technology that we cannot create this 3 days of waiting and sweating it out. Just doesn't seem fair, and it's not, and it hurts tourism. The more obstacles we put in the path of tourism, the less people are going to want to travel.
Yeah, and this is not such a huge problem, I think. Now, to be fair, this rule was just changed from one day to another last week. So maybe we have to adopt, and maybe airlines will adopt, and the private industry is usually a lot faster than the government. Let's see where this goes.
When they have these types of rules, the problem is if you're doing it 2 weeks down the road, they probably will be able to adapt to it. But if it happens to you the day you're traveling and they change instantaneously, because they don't say this is effective as 3 weeks. They say this is effective tomorrow. And therefore, all of a sudden, you're caught because you're working on one system and now the whole system just collapsed. So that's a real problem. And, you know, there's more countries talking about required quarantine again. And, you know, if you're a business person and you have to then go through all that, have your triple vaccination, have your PCR, and then you're still going to have to quarantine. A lot of people are going to say, you know what, Zoom is a real alternative. And I think that's something we have to take into account, that it used to be the business traveler had no choice but to travel. But now, just like you and I are chatting, there are alternatives to business travel, and people are holding meetings, and we've gotten used to it after 2 years. So if the airline industry really has to scramble, one, to up its customer service, which is terrible, and two, to be sensitive to the needs of passengers, because if it's not, it will not have passengers.
And Peter, I mean, how is the situation? No one ever talks about it, but so many people are traveling and they do catch COVID.
Yes.
Luckily, not everyone dies or gets seriously sick, but many people may not even feel very much. But what would happen? You have to quarantine. You have to quarantine where you are. Who's going to pay these expenses, and how can you safely quarantine?
No one knows. Really, no one knows. And when and if you're traveling and you have to quarantine, you have an issue.
Yes, and an expensive issue.
Yes.
And that's again, buying. I'm not an insurance agent, but I would not travel these days without this extra insurance in my pocket. So if something happens, at least you're covered.
Yeah. Now, who knows how quickly these insurance agencies actually, pay. I mean, when I travel abroad the last few times, I've had COVID insurance. I haven't needed it. I don't know what would happen if I actually needed to use it. And even then, do you get it to the day you leave the country, or do you get it for 2 weeks after you leave the country? How long do you keep this insurance? Is the insurance good only with the day you got diagnosed with COVID, or is it good until you're 2 weeks later?
Well, I think it's good till you get home, but then of course, hopefully you have your own insurance anyway when you get home. It is more meant for the time you're abroad and you don't have your own insurance.
Right. Well, but if you can't get on a plane, then you're abroad 2 more weeks than you expected.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's an interesting question. Maybe we should have an insurance guy on one of our future shows.
I think that would be really good, because I think most people, I mean, I bought insurance for when we went to Israel, but I really, I bought insurance for the day we arrived to the day after we left. But I wasn't really sure, should I buy it for another 2 weeks? And when you're doing it with 20 people, you're multiplying. It's not one insurance policy. You're now multiplying by many insurance policies.
Absolutely. So many questions, so many unanswered questions. So we have a lot more to go. And I hope I'm going to see you again very soon.
I hope so. Maybe tomorrow. So anyway, listen, I hope the sun will come out, and it will only rain in Hawaii at night so that you can maintain your level of paradise.
It actually, Peter, it feels okay, because the rain was, first of all, it was needed. It has been quite hot, and secondly, it gives us a different flair, I guess. And
how happy are your visitors in the rain?
Luckily, in the building I live, we have a very nice outside pool, and it's open regardless whether it rains or not. And you're going to get wet anyway, so I'm still going to do my pool night here tonight.
When I was a child, my father used to tell me, if it rains, definitely swim under the water.
Absolutely. Well, right. For anyone else, we're going to have this in archive. So if you want to listen to it again, just simply go to our YouTube channel. You can go to any of our websites and click on YouTube, or simply go to youtube.com/travel news group, or at youtube.com. eTurboNews goes to the same destination, and we'll be live on and off during the time. You've seen our screen has changed a little bit on eTurboNews. You can actually see all our previous live streams, including this one, right on the front page as well. And once we go live, your screen will get a little bit bigger, and you can see there's a live broadcast going on. Just if it doesn't start automatically, just click on the start button and you will hear our next live show. Peter, it's a pleasure having you, and we talked to you.
And my pleasure having you. So if you probably haven't eaten lunch yet, so go eat.
No, I did have my lunch. It's 4 in the afternoon.
All right. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Okay.